So when I hear people telling me today, oh, Africa is poor because of colonization, I'm like, please, let's move on from that.
Hello there. So today is one of those days I need mature discussion from you. So the question is Africa poor as a result of colonization? And the reason I'm saying this is because I recently came across these tweets from a lady who claims that Africa is not poor because of colonization. And as expected, it generated a lot of negative comments. So I want you to listen to this and let us discuss whether it's true that Africa is poor because of other reasons, but not colonization.
Today, Singapore is richer than its ex-colonizer, Great Britain. So when I hear people telling me today, oh, Africa is poor because of colonization, I'm like, please, let's move on from that. Does it have maybe a tiny percentage in where we are today? Maybe, and I don't know. But I know it's not the cause. Because if it were, many countless countries have been colonized before. And by the way, colonizing one another is humanity's history. It just happened that maybe Africa has been one of the last, colonized region in the world. So in our psyche, it is there, and it acts like nothing happened before to others. But flash news, it's the history of the world. We've been capturing each other back and forth, all of that. So anyway, but the truth is, Singapore, richer than Great Britain today. And then Hong Kong happened. And then because Hong Kong happened, China even today happened. Because China's like, wait a minute, what went on over there?
So what do you think? Do you think that she's right? I want to know that in the comment section below. Do you think that Africa was set up to lose by the colonial masters? Or do you think that bureaucratic red tapes in Africa and bad policies in Africa still makes the continent poorer than, other continents? Now, I know a lot of countries in Africa still have that colonial legacies where they still maintain the old red tapes that makes it hard for African countries to integrate and trade among themselves. Because you find, I've said this before, you find a country like Kenya easily trading with India and China. And you find another country like Tanzania easily trading with the same two countries, that is India and China, and they are neighbors. But the trade between Kenya and Tanzania is usually problematic. There's usually a lot of conflict. So that is a red tape. They usually impose red tape between themselves, but they don't do the same when it comes to the Chinese or the Indians. So that is one of the reasons. But my 2 cents, as I wait for your comments, is that Africa's colonial masters left behind a way of life that is completely decimated. A people that were traumatized and taught in colonial schools to loathe and hate ourselves, everything about ourselves, our skin, our languages, our dress code, our hair, our customs. So we were taught to hate that. Even our own gods were replaced with the colonial gods. As the psychoanalyst and revolutionary writer Frantz Fanon put it this way in his 1961 book titled The Wretched of the Earth, he said that colonialism is not satisfied merely with holding a people in its grip and emptying the native's brain of all form and content, but instead, he said that through a kind of perverted logic, it turns to the past of those oppressed people and distorts, disfigures, and destroys it. Basically, what he meant is that colonization was used to first of all go into our past, into our history, the good thing about us. So they took that, they distorted our ways, they disfigured our history, and then they destroyed that past. So what we are left with is emptiness from our past. And now we have to believe everything going forward from what they tell us. And that is what happens in Africa. A lot of Africans, everything they know is about Christianity. We keep talking about Jesus. And Jesus he was from, Israel. It's the Israelites who should be talking about Jesus and Abraham and Jacob. But Africans don't even know their own ancestor. You find people praying to the gods of Jacob, to the gods of other people's ancestors. And that's what colonization did. So that's what he was saying in his book. And something else that colonization did was that the European, with their sheer ignorance and cultural disregard, they drew borders that forced various ethnic groups that have been in conflict for centuries. They have been enemies for hundreds of years. So they took these people and made them neighbors and fellow men or fellow countrymen within the same borders. So, for example, in Rwanda, in Congo, in Nigeria, the Biafran War. In Sudan, the Darfur region, the Darfur genocide. Because they forced black people, mostly from the Central African region, and put them in the same country with Arabs. And those two people don't go well together, right? So that's what Africa did. And that is what is happening to Congo, a very rich country with a lot of minerals. But people keep fighting because they were forced to exist in one country, even though these people have been enemies for centuries. So that is the other thing that colonization did. And that is now the reason why it's very hard to do administration in a country like Congo and bring development. Do you understand? And now what you have, all those things put together, is that because of that oppression, then it brought about the desire by Africans for self-determination. And these spawned militant separatist groups. And then what we got is a bunch of tyrannical dictators. People like Museveni, people like Robert Mugabe. We had Idi Amin, Mobutu Sese Seko, Francisco Macias Nguema. They came in as revolutionary freedom fighters, but once they got to power, you know what they did? So they took us back, just like the European, and they started actually doing the bidding of the colonial masters. So then that is as a result of colonization. Now, I'm saying this so that we don't in future have people who are ignorant, and I'm sorry to say that, or who are misinformed, like our sister here. She goes to that podcast, she starts saying that Africa is not poor because of colonization. She starts saying that Singapore was colonized. One thing she doesn't know is that Singapore was a city in Malaysia, and Chinese traders came all the way from China and Macau. And these Chinese started settling there, and eventually they outnumbered the native Malay people, so the Malaysians. So what happened in the end is that these Chinese people started calling for secession of this island from Malaysia. And eventually they took it and made it a country, a city country. That's what they call it. But technically, Singapore is an island that is colonized by the Chinese, formerly a Malaysian island. But that is a story for another day. What I want to say here is that Africa will continue being poor even for more years to come, thanks to colonization, because our past was deleted, distorted, and taken away from us. And what we have from Cape Town to Egypt is a people that are even worshipping foreign gods, gods from other countries, and people, or a population of people who hate themselves. Just walk into any beauty shop and see the kind of product they are selling there. They are selling products that are supposed to change our daughters to look like Europeans. Even in Egypt, they want to look like Europeans. They don't want to look like Arabs. So that is what is happening in Africa. That is what colonization did. They made us hate ourselves and hate our continent. And what you have, we have leaders who use Pan-Africanism to get voted in. And the moment they become presidents, they run to those same people they were saying that they hate. They go to the Chinese, they go to the white people, they send their whole family to go and live in Switzerland and Canada, and their children study there, they speak the language from there, because even our own leaders, they hate our countries.